I can't believe it's really been already 10 years. And if I can just give our listeners a quick update, um, 10 years ago in the city of Ferguson, a small suburb here in St. Louis community, we had two really major waves of activity. We had, the unfortunate killing of Michael Brown Jr., and then we had Darren Wilson, who was not indicted. And both of those created circumstances that are just unbelievable that you had to manage and lead. You had hundreds of officers in riot gear during the unrest between the community and law enforcement. You were tapped, and it was an amazing story to hear how you were tapped and how surprised you were to learn that you were going to be asked to be the leader representing the Missouri State Highway Patrol during that time, and what ultimately came out to be the role of a peacemaker in many ways. No doubt, Ron, this had to change your life. You woke up and you had immediate life change with the assignment and duty that you accepted at that time. Ryan, can you give us some idea of how did this change your life 10 years later? Tell us a little bit about where it's taken you and what you've learned since then.
Well, thanks for having me, Phil. That moment in time really has made me a stronger leader. It's made me really look at and analyze what leadership means. And I think for me, I got back to being the basic of the leader that I am. And I talk about being a servant leader. I think sometimes we get really caught up in the titles that we have. And I would say the first day that I stepped on the streets of Ferguson in that uniform, I thought the title that I had in the uniform would be enough to bring peace. And it really wasn't. It was getting back down to being that servant leader who actually listens and understands and has compassion. And so that really drove me to my plan and my approach to doing Ferguson. And now, I've expanded my outreach of leadership. I started a company called Lodestone. And, we do a lot of consulting. We do leadership training. We go and we've talked to law enforcement, we've talked to corporations, nonprofits, and we talk about the importance of leadership and what it really means. And we talk about being a worthy leadership and what makes that are the people that you serve. And leadership must be an honor, but leadership is a challenge. And it not only affects the leader, but it affects those around us, our family, our friends, and our daily walk. And so, I continue to do that, continue to do work in St. Louis with different groups, just trying to bring that connectivity between whether it's the workforce and companies or whether it's just the community and law enforcement.
So Ron, the word servant leader, we talk a lot about that in some of the training programs that we offer here at AIM. I hear a lot of leaders talk about why I'm a servant leader style. And I think that can mean a lot of different things, but I don't know, Nick, if you are able to see the photo I picked for my screen here. I know Ron will know this photo if it's visible, Ron, and it's where you're walking, I believe, the streets of Ferguson, and you're hugging a man that has killer and police on the back of his shirt. And that was a famous photo at its height during the Ferguson protests and riots. When you chose that position and then you were practicing your leadership on the spot, right? You hadn't had this kind of training and preparation. That to me is one example, and I've been privileged enough to hear your presentation about those days, but that's one example of servant leadership that takes on a message different than many people think of in serving leader. To go hug a man that's got that on their shirt representing maybe you as the opposition is a great example of serving all, not just those who agree with you.
And in that moment, I think some people were surprised that I would hug him, but I walked up and his arms were outreached. And I think that was a moment that told me that I was asking him not to judge me for the uniform that I was wearing, and I must be the same. But he had his arms reached out, and that tells me that someone that's wanting to talk, that someone that's wanting to communicate, and that's someone who has a need. And I think I remember that embrace. It was a tight embrace, and it really weren't words exchanged. He
Yeah.
just said, "Thank you for being here."
Yeah, and I mean, that's just a fantastic expression, I think, sometimes of, helping build bridges by reaching across aisles and so forth. Ron, one of the things that you talked about recently in the programming that you've done, I think it was on CBS, there was a special 10 years after Ferguson that you recently have been involved in. But one of the things you talk about is reaching out not just to leaders with leadership training. Tell us where you discovered this and why is this important?
Well, I think we to give value. I think we give value. We need to give value to everyone in our companies, everyone in our organizations. But I just looked back at Ferguson and a lot of things that weren't reported on the news, a lot of things that allowed me and helped me during that time were just people that were on the ground, people that didn't have titles, with just mothers, fathers, sons, cousins, and so forth. And so, companies, I think, a lot of times we don't give leadership training until someone reaches a certain height in our corporation, or until someone says, I see something in them. Well, on a daily basis, a lot of leadership goes on at the bottom. And it is that leadership that goes on often and probably more time than the leader at the top really has to play that role. And those bottom tier leaders, and if you give them value, you'll see greater outcomes. You'll see greater outcomes in your communities, greater outcomes in your corporations, greater outcomes in your nonprofits. And so it's just important to give value and letting those leaders know that you can lead without a title, and your leadership has an enormous impact.
Yeah, I know when I talk with my kids, I would always express leadership is not a title. There are titles that we respect because of their position, political titles, they're in the medical profession, and as a police officer, there's titles and people that have positions that deserve a certain level of respect and compassion due to the title, but every person leads. Leadership is not a title. And that's the discussion that we have. Leadership is what you do as an individual and how you influence those around you all the time, either by supporting or by contrasting even another opinion of another person. You're in one way or another always leading by example. Talk to us a little bit about, I mean, use a great example about when you walk into a business, often it isn't the leaders who are making the first impression. It's all the other workers. And I think you may have used an example about a hospital worker. Give us some
Yes.
examples
So
there.
we spoke with a hospital, and we talked to their workers. And I talked about when I walk into a hospital, the first thing that I look at is how clean the hospital is and what it looks like coming in that first view. And I said, what about a morning when two maintenance guys are there and they're cleaning, and one is having a bad day, says, I just don't feel like working today. And the other guy says, well, what's going on? And he kind of explains, and the other guy gives him some advice and some solutions, or at least says, I've gone through that, and this is what I did. And then as the day goes on, the guy says, you know what? I feel a lot better. Now they're both clean. They're both doing this great job. Well, that impacts that hospital for everybody that comes in, whether it's a visitor, whether it's a patient. And that has been a great leadership moment. That gentleman is giving his coworker a great leadership moment. And what value does that have for that hospital or that business? And
Yeah.
so, but you have to give value to that. That gentleman needs to know that he can make those leadership decisions. When we have two individuals that are together and one is making a bad decision, and someone steps in and corrects that, that's a leadership moment. And so we have to value those. And I think when we do that, when I give these presentations, I tell you, Phil, the reaction of those workers that have never been given that kind of training or been told that they've got valued leadership and that they are leaders in their own right is amazing.
Yeah. And I think that gets back to that heart of that servant leader. It's not who we choose to serve, it's that we serve everyone in that style of leadership. And I know in our training, people right away can connect with servant leadership, but what we discover in the training often is what are your boundaries when you think of yourself as a servant leader? And that's why I wanted to bring this photo up in that conversation, because in the truest sense of servant leader, you're really serving everyone before yourself. And that is what makes servant leadership style extremely difficult. Now, I know in my household, I can practice that pretty easily, right? I mean, I got my wife, I got the dogs, I got the kids, and then somewhere down here, I come in that picture. But usually I'm the very last one, and that's not by my choice of being a servant leader. That's just a hierarchy in the Brandt household. But it's not an easy road to be a servant leader. Ron, can you tell us a little bit about how did the CBS primetime special 13 Days in Ferguson come about?
And so I wrote a book called 13 Days in Ferguson and kind of just highlighted my experiences doing Ferguson. And then, we ended up talking with CBS, Cedric Entertainer, his agent, Eric Rohn. And we also talked about wanting to show it on the live screen and just show that there's courage that goes into leadership, the challenges of leadership, because we have a lot of leaders that do a great job on a daily basis, a lot of law enforcement leaders, and just showing those challenges, the courage that goes with it, the impact that can have on the leader, the impact that it can have on family, but also the importance of compassion and empathy and how we can bridge gaps together. And so the special 13 days in Ferguson actually has some activists that were there on the ground in Ferguson, some other religious leaders, business leaders, but it also showed me sitting on the couch talking to Michael Brown Jr.'s father. And I think it just shows what compassion, empathy, being a servant leader, uh, what you can accomplish in relationships, not only in the community, but also within your business and your organization.
Yeah. Is when you think back and where you are today and the connections you still have to the Brown family, the Ferguson community, is there any one thing that you look back and you feel really most proud of, the change that you've seen come forth that makes you proud and puts a smile on your face?
I always say the leaders must walk down the middle of the road. That's always the toughest part of the road where the rumble strips are. But I think just the ability to still walk in this arena uh, and have bridged relationships and hopefully making things better. When my phone rings, whether it's from law enforcement, whether it's from companies, are those individuals that were on the streets of Ferguson, that were truly on the other side of law enforcement, that are willing to talk and have a different view and are willing to seek change and seek improvement. And so I think it's those things that I'm most proud of.
Yeah, when I was doing some research before the program, and I mean the city has really gone through a complete transformation from its political structure, the police department structure, the activities that the community is involved in. Where today there's a community center in place of a quick trip, and I mean it's just really from a St. Louis point of view, you see a transformation that has occurred. I believe that's the journey, the start of the journey for improvement. But most of our listeners around the country don't necessarily see these things, right? Because it's the newest story that they're going to read about in the news, in the headline. How often do you speak with the Brown family still today, if at all?
I have spoken. Matter of fact, I attended on Sunday. They had a church a celebration, and my wife and I went and sat in the church and listened to the speeches and the talks. There was an unfortunate incident in Ferguson on last Friday, and you're right that the Ferguson community is doing a lot of hard work. And they've made a lot of gains and a lot of changes. And that was an unfortunate incident, and I prayed for Officer Brown. But yesterday, I got a text from Michael Brown Sr. Uh, asking that he wanted to possibly meet with the family of Officer Brown and give them his sympathy and his prayers. And he asked if I would join him in visiting them. And so, those are the things that the media might not hear or report And I think
Right.
it gives us hope of where we can go and where we're going in this community, in this country.
Yeah. The reason why I brought that up, Ron, because you were kind enough to share that with Bert and I in the pre-show, is I think that's an example, again, of what you mean when you're talking about servant leadership and when you are talking to your audiences and the platform that you have through your consulting and the book that you wrote is that's off the screen. That's behind the spotlights. No one is aware of it. You can get paid to do that, take the call, spend the time, help the healing. It's just a continuation of your mission and what you've been called to do, necessarily, not what you signed up to do. And for that, I know those are the things that really make me proud to know you, Ron, and you don't realize this, but I often have asked myself in different times of difficulty, I wonder what Ron would do in this situation here, you know? It's a tough spot, and we don't always know right from wrong. And like you say, it's that gray area. One last thing, I know you have several tips on leadership. Is there any final tip on leadership you'd like to leave the audience with? And then we'll encourage them to go out, find your book, and look you up here.
Leadership must encompass compassion and empathy. You know, I wake up each day and I tell people that before I get out of bed, I look at my feet and I ask what my impact will be today, what my steps will be, and how impactful will they will be. So I would ask each of you each day to look at yourself and say what your steps will be and what the impact they will have.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, Ron, tell us the name of your book, where they can get it, how they can reach out to you if they would like to engage in conversation with you.
Name of the book is 13 Days in Ferguson. Barnes and Noble, all the bookstores will have it. You can get it over the internet. The name of our company is Lodestone. It's at ron.johnson at lodestonesg.com, LODESTONESG.com.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link aimea.org/This Week at Work, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.